Welcome to SockCon, the conference for socks. All right, so why socks? You're all wearing them, why not, right? Now, do you know the history of socks? Like, I found this extremely fascinating that we didn't wear socks as humanity all through life. Like, people did wraps around their legs instead of wearing socks. Like, had no idea. So my presentation's gonna blow your socks off, right? The first socks are found in mummies and ancient cultures, beyond just wrapping around it and wearing sandals, right? They found, mostly in colder areas to protect the feet, and lots of weird materials like animal yak fur and things like that. So this is legit a talk on socks. Raise your hand if you wore weird socks. Good, you follow directions. I have George Washington. So socks became known as like a religious thing. Religious leaders wore them, and very wealthy, like status symbols. So we're at the Pfister Hotel. You guys wear socks. It all comes together as prestigious, right? And I see our special guest is here, Greg Marcus. Go ahead and come on up. Thanks, Greg, for coming to SockCon.
Michael, thank you for having me. Well, thanks, you guys. I'm glad you're all here at the Pfister, that's for sure. Yes, I am. Thank the Lord. I did not wear plain socks today. I didn't know I was coming to SockCon, actually. I thought this was CypherCon, but okay, I'm glad to be here for SockCon. You basically said I could talk about anything I wanted. That's almost actually that's hard, because that's what do I talk about for? I think I got to get away from this. I got to step back from the speaker. Is it getting the feedback? Okay. Well, we can talk a little bit about the Pfister. We can talk about, we have a saying, and I think that to this group that totally understands this, it's because the history of just technology moves so fast. We have a saying in the company: the only constant is change. And if you think about the history of our company goes back, 87 years now. We finished up. We were built. My grandfather started it in 1935. So, where's everybody from? Is everybody from around here? Or is it national, or is it regional? Mostly Wisconsin. So you know who we are. Anybody ever go to the movies? So you might have seen me once before? Okay. Let me tell you, there's absolutely nothing worse than seeing yourself on about a minimum 40-foot screen. Oh my God, I want to yak. And I'm going tonight. Actually, I go to the movies I try to go every week. Tonight the choice is, actually, I should let you guys pick my movie, but I'm not sure if I'll go with it for sure. But my choice is either, one is Shazam, or two is the new Dungeons and Dragons. There's a preview showing. D&D? Yeah, that's either two. It's supposed to be a great movie, actually. Okay, that's what I'm going with. Thank you for helping me out on that. So I've diverted from the only constant is change. But my grandfather started with a movie theater in Ripon, Wisconsin, the campus theater, for those of you that are near Ripon and Oshkosh. That's the first one. We still have it to this day, because even though the only constant is change, it's also important to remember where you came from. And it's important, there's I've never seen anyone standing at the top of that up there. That's really cool. Is that really Taylor Swift? Oh, by the way, as you get older, my distance vision sucks. I can't see that far. I can read a menu, which really bothers my wife, but it's because she's like, oh, when you hit 50, you're not going to be able to read a menu anymore. And I'm like, yeah, I got past that, but I can't see Taylor Swift. I get it. Okay. She's not real. Okay. What was I talking? Oh, wait. So history, we also remember that history is prologue. You'll see that outside the National Archives in D.C., which basically says it will repeat itself, and in fact, that's what's given me comfort as we've gone through the last few years, which for our company, I mean, let me tell you something. You can't pick two worse businesses than hotels and movie theaters in a pandemic. Oh. No, cruise ships, yeah, they were pretty terrible during the pandemic, but yet people are nutty enough to get back on them right now. And actually, the hotel business has come back to where it was pre-pandemic. The movie theater business hasn't, but I don't actually think that's because people don't want to go to the movies. There's been this whole shift. Again, with technology, this whole shift, streaming. But yet, what gave me confidence as we got through this time was that we're still human beings, right? And what do they talk about? I shouldn't say this, but as I'm talking to a bunch of people who are talking about hacking, but social engineering is one of your best tools, right? You count on sort of human nature, and humans want to be together, and that's what's given me that. So hotels, it's not surprising that hotels came back. Theaters, it's not because people don't want to go. I'll give you a great stat. In 2022, our business was down 35%. Now, that's horrible because in our business, it's a high fixed cost business, which means, we've got to, no matter if one person or 100 people show up, we've got to pay the mortgage on the building. We've got to pay the utility bills for the lights to go on. If it were actually to snow here on a more regular basis, thank God it didn't this year, but we'd have to be plowing the snow, and it doesn't matter who shows up. So once you cover that fixed nut, that's where you can become more profitable. So when 35% of your business goes away, you can only imagine how still hard that is on our business. But 35% down, 35% fewer films were released than pre-pandemic in 2022. So almost the average per film was relatively similar since the pandemic, and that just says people want to go. If Hollywood would give us movies to see, then people will show up at them. And I do struggle a little bit with people say, that's just for the big movies. That's just for the Dungeons and Dragons and for the Shazams. But the smaller movies, I can watch those at home, which you can. But there's something about being in a room full of people where you cry together, or you laugh together, or you're scared together. There's an interesting dynamic. And the message that we're preaching to Hollywood these days is that, when you're laying at home and you're laying on your sofa, as I want to do on occasion, like every night, you sit there with your remote and you very passively just, click through stuff until you find something. Or it's almost like a war of attrition as you try to figure out what to watch on your streaming services. You're going through all the little tiles and you're trying to figure it out, and finally you're like, fine, we'll watch that. When you go to the movies, you invest. There's an investment that you're making. It's your time, which is valuable. You are going to not be it's not coming at your whim. I mean, we have a lot of show times, but you have to pick a show time. You actually have to get off the dent in your couch, and you have to go somewhere. And when you make that investment, you really want to like what you saw. It builds a relationship. And it's funny, I had this discussion with the guys from Apple. And I think we've heard in the last few days they're talking about releasing more movies in theaters, and I'm really glad to hear that. But this was a few months ago, and I said to them, so why are you making movies? I mean, because let's face it, they're a giant company, and whatever they could make in the movie business is a pimple on their big giant, hindquarters. And so why? And the person from Apple said, well, we want people to love their devices. We want to build a relationship. We want people to, the stuff they see on the device, we want to love. I said, well, that's perfect, because then movie theaters are perfect for you, because we're in the business of making memories for people. And whether you went with your girlfriend or your wife to see a movie, or your kid or your grandkid or your grandfather or your parent, and you watched it, you did something with them, there's a relationship that you're building and a memory that you're building. I said, you want people to love your devices, let that be the memory of something they did with their family or with someone who means something to them or a friend, anything. And I hope they get that message, because I do think it's important, because there's always been TV. We've been around for a long time, and I watch TV. We all watch TV. But if you want to leave the house and you want to get out, I do think it's important to get out. Then, it's the movies are there, which brings up another thing I talk about for a minute, since I've got a mic in my hand: the importance of getting out. I've always said, I shouldn't say I've always said, but recently, as I've thought about it more, technology can be very enabling, and yet it can be very disabling at the same time if you take it too far. So, like Zoom, Zoom is great. It is a great technology in that you can see someone. It's not just a conference call. You can actually see them, and that adds to it, and it allows us the flexibility that, if I need to take a meeting and I can't be there, well, that's great. That's very enabling. But if it becomes the default where I'm never leaving my house, I think that's really bad for society. It goes beyond just, people say, oh, you want people back in the office because it's good for your company. Well, yeah, it is good for our company, because I actually believe that, you can't replace what's going on in this room. You're all forming relationships. This would really pretty much stink if there were, 150 little squares on a TV screen. You were trying to do it that way. But together, there's power in that. There's power in being with people. And, we're such a divided society that and it goes, they talk about, there was a book written in 2000, this was almost 25 years ago, called Bowling Alone. Bowling Alone talked about America, they were starting to see what they thought would be a problem, in that they said countries that have, and communities that have high degrees of social trust, not just I trust my neighbor, but I trust maybe even a stranger who might pull over to the side of the road to help me fix a flat tire, or someone who might help me with something. That there's that level of trust. The higher the degree of trust, the more successful the community is. And so they were seeing, and the way you get that trust is by having, your social bonds, being together, being with people. And they were pointing out how people had stopped going to Rotary and had stopped going to, churches and houses of worship, and how people had stopped going to bowling league, which for Wisconsin may be really important. At least when I was a kid, bowling league was a big thing. But that's what they called the book Bowling Alone. And they were saying our bonds of social trust were being frayed. That was 25 years ago. Fast forward today, and here's the game plan. We're all going to sit at home, alone, isolated, and not be among people, and be further divided, and sit in our silos, and only be focused on our narrow niche. I don't think that's a good thing. I think we need to be together, and people who are different than us, and see people who are different than us, and might think differently than we do, so that we understand that we may have different viewpoints, but that for the most part, except on the far extremes, we approach things relatively similarly. And with the same goals. We want to raise our families. We want to have good communities. We want to thrive, and we want to have success, and all those things. And that's a common theme. And if you can be with people who aren't like you, I think that's really important. So this idea of being isolated, I think it's bad. And frankly, we're seeing the impacts of it. People are nuts these days. I we see it. They're crazy. They're short-tempered. They do things that are just stupid. I can't believe it. And they're taught. So and it's like, we know that a therapy appointment, you can't book a therapy appointment these days. It's because everybody's nuts. And there's one I've heard recently where they say, and if you're sitting at home in the morning, because they're talking about how substance abuse is up, they're seeing addiction is up, because, when you show up to work, if you've had a couple of pops in the morning, someone might smell you, Now it's like they say, on Zoom, blow on your coffee cup in the morning so someone thinks there's something hot in it. Ooh. So, as I said, here's an enabling technology that became very disabling. Think about some of the stuff that goes on Twitter, an enabling technology to communicate, it smooths communications, and yet, It can be very corrosive. You know, I get some very nice Twitters, and I get some very not so nice Twitters. Like, really? You had to write that to me? Thank you so little. So it's important that I think we recognize that. And but the constant is change, as we said. Our company has changed. We started with one movie theater in Ripon, the movie theater business grew, and then TV came along, and then that was like an shit moment. And then my grandfather said, well, let's be in some other businesses, and so we got into the restaurant business. We were in the Big Boy business, if you remember those. But that changed. Big Boy went away. McDonald's ate Big Boy's lunch, so to speak. And then we got into the Budgetel and the Baymont business, and then that changed, and now we're in the full-service hotel business. And then the theaters came back around to being more important in our business. So the only constant is change, which I think telling an audience like this that is like saying the sky's blue when the sun's out around here. So with that, that's sort of where my head's at these days. I appreciate you giving me the mic and giving me the chance just to welcome you to the Pfister, and thank you all for being our customers. I'm very appreciative of that. I think I was always appreciative of people who were our customers, but man, the pandemic certainly gave me even more reason to feel that way, because it was existential for us. We were very worried that we weren't going to make it. And we're going to make it, and so I'm happy for that. I'm happy to be able to stand in front of you and welcome you. And with that, I mean, if anybody wants to ask me a question, I love Q&A. I don't know, Michael, how much time do you want to give me? If anybody wants to ask me a question, I'm happy to take it. Usually I get crickets sometimes. Oh, there's a question in the back. Go ahead. Favorite of all time. That's a hard. I get that question, so I'm moderately prepared. But and I got to be honest, I can't pick one, but I can pick it in genres. So my favorite drama, and if I almost would say my favorite movie, was a movie called North by Northwest, which was an Alfred Hitchcock film with Cary Grant and even Reese Saint. And my children, who said they won't watch a movie before the year they were born, don't even want to watch it, but I think it's a great drama. I also love Memento. I don't know if anybody's ever seen Memento. That's a great movie, isn't it? Yeah, Chris Nolan film. That's one of my favorites. And then I go to comedy, and I have two there. One is Animal House, which is that a pledge pin on your uniform? I pretty much could do that movie from start to end. And Blazing Saddles, which is one of my favorites. How did you know? I was totally going to say Sneakers. I love that movie. SeaTac, what was it called? SeaTac Astronomy, yeah. See, I did remember that movie. Oh yeah, no, actually, I made my kids watch that recently. And who doesn't remember? I mean, I don't know. My brother is a little bit of a conspiracy theorist, and I constantly am reminded of the Dan Aykroyd scenes where he's like, remember the cows? Like, they didn't really land on the moon. I mean, I love that movie. That is my favorite hacker movie. I don't tell people to do that. I know everybody comes up to me. That's why we did one of these ads. You saw it that said, everybody says that I say that, and I've never said that. Because I always told our people, I want to go up there. I don't want to be doling out, putting out the rules. I want to be Mr. Fun, and so I've never said it. But my phone is off. Well, no, it's not. That's a lie. I'm not going to look at it. I saw something. Go ahead.
What's your favorite venue to go watch movies at?
My favorite venue, Eddie Marcus Theater, is my favorite venue. I will tell you, I do think the best screen in Milwaukee is the Ultra Screen at the North Shore. It's got the perfect viewing angles because of the way we built it. I will cue you into something that's interesting. Historically, when we built most of these theaters and you were sitting, like in a regular seat where you couldn't recline, the best seat was the middle of the house where you're looking right at the screen. But a little insider tip here, you actually want to get a little lower now with the recliners because you recline and then you're looking up at the screen. And so at the North Shore, row E, the last row of the lower section, is the best seat in town. I see, way in the back, go ahead.
When's Mark's Big Boy coming back?
What are you talking about? You can go to the St. Kate at dinner time at Aria, and we've been serving the Big Boy for years. So that's about as good as I'm going to be able to do. I'm sorry.
Still take the tops off of the season salt so nobody steals
Excuse me, that was good seasoning salt.
That was my fault, I'm sorry.
About the Pfister? It's haunted. I swear it's haunted. Yes. It's actually the biggest. That's the funny. Actually, I'll tell you a funny story. So one day, I'm driving in the car, and I have ESPN radio on, and Reggie Miller, the basketball player, is on the Dan Patrick Show, and they're talking to Reggie, and they're like, "Where are you?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm in Oklahoma City." They're like, he goes, "It's not like Vegas here. I can't get in any trouble here. I'm staying at this hotel in Oklahoma City, and that it's haunted. You know, it's like this Skirvin, which we recently sold, but we owned the Skirvin then." And I'm listening to this discussion, and they're like, "Oh yeah, Oklahoma City. That's just like sort of being in Milwaukee, and they got that hotel, the Pfister. That's haunted too." And so I ended up tweeting. I got it. This was sort of the earlier days of Twitter, and I don't do a lot of tweeting, but I went on Twitter and I found Dan Patrick and Reggie Miller, and I added them, and I wrote, "I just happen to be the CEO of the company that owns both of those hotels. I ain't afraid of no ghosts."
Favorite horror movie?
Oh, favorite horror movie. You know, I'm not the biggest horror guy. I honestly, I will say though, and it's funny, I don't know if this is necessarily a horror movie, but I loved A Quiet Place. I thought that was an exceptional movie. They tell me that's a horror movie, so okay. I was cool with that. You know, I saw Megan, the other day, recently, and they made me do a Megan dance on TikTok. So, boy, I shouldn't even tell you about this, but if you want, go to the Marcus Theater's TikTok. If you want to see me being an idiot, go for it. What is clear is that I will do anything that my social media people tell me to do. Anybody else? Going once, going twice, gone. Oh, wait! Oh, right before the hammerhead. You know, I don't think ever, actually. It's interesting. But, okay, this is, so it talks about sort of, it gives me, what do you do when you have this, when all of your businesses are closed and you're completely screwed and you're wondering what to do? The first thing you do is you sell popcorn on the sidewalks, and which is what we were doing during the pandemic. And then, I don't know if, for those of you that know, someone said, well, okay, how about we try parking lot theater? And we went at the Majestic, and we put on the side of the Majestic, we put a screen on the side, and we did, and it was like, oh, it's like going, back to the old drive-in days. We so I thought, let's go try it out. And my wife and whichever of my kids were around, and we drove over and watched, what did we watch? I think it was E.T. Something was good. Whatever it was good. And because they were playing, there were no new movies, they were playing classics. But you know what? Sitting in your car, listening to it on the radio, and my sound system is okay, it doesn't even compare to going and being in a recliner and watching it on a 70-foot screen. So it was novel back then, but I don't think they're coming back, because just what a theater has become so much better than what you can do with that. And there'll be some novelty, I'm sure, every once in a while someone will do a pop-up, but I don't think they're coming back anytime soon. All right, thanks everybody. Oh, thank you. You have a question? Is that? Okay. History of the Pfister. Oh man, the Pfistery. That's good. I like that, the Pfistery. It was built in this is a test. What do I know about the history of the Pfister? I can tell you, it was built in 1893 by Guido Pfister, who was of the Pfister-Vogel tanning family. He was an entrepreneur in Milwaukee. It was the first hotel that ever had a thermostat, because Johnson Controls. Yeah, this was the first hotel to have thermostatic control, and it was and it passed from, it went from the Pfister family to the Smith family somewhere along the line, and then the Smith family owned it, or certain members owned it until 1962. In 1962, my grandfather, this is actually a pretty interesting story. So my grandfather, as I said, he was in the movie theater business and the restaurant business. That was all he was in at that point. And but he also was making some other investments, and he owned a a motor lodge in Appleton, which is now the La Quinta at College and 41, and which where the Hollywood Theater is that intersection. He owned all that land where the Hollywood Theater is, and there was a Big Boy there, and there was a Captain Steak Joint, and it was the Guest House Inn. And the Guest House Inn was, you know, I mean, your classic, I used to refer to it as a Soprano-style hotel. You back the car up, toss the body in, and leave. And so now that's his only hotel, this hotel in central Wisconsin. He had moved to Milwaukee in, I don't know, must have been late 50s or something, early 60s. And he's hanging out with a bunch of guys who are servicing the Pfister. One guy's the meat provider for the hotel, one guy's doing the cleaning of stuff. And so they're sitting around, I guess they said to him, hey, you know, Ben, something's wrong at the Pfister. They're not paying their bills. I think they're having a problem. You're in the hotel business. You should buy the Pfister. He owns one motor lodge in central Wisconsin. He's gonna buy this Grand Dame hotel in downtown Milwaukee. But he was an entrepreneurial guy. He's like, sure, let's do it. He ended up buying the mortgage and ended up ultimately converting it to the equity of the hotel, put together new investors, and redid the hotel and built, so which we're in here, we're in the old section. We call it the old section because it's built in 1893. But in 1962, they built the parking structure that you park in, and then the tower, that round, I guess they call it the beer can, you know, that's atop the parking structure. And that's when my dad actually came into business, and that's when he started the hotel side of our business. And so in 62, they built that. We call that the new section, which I guess is not so new 60 years later. And it's been that way. We've had it ever since. And it's the crown jewel of the company. I always say it's the one untouchable asset in our entire company. My parents are married here. I got married here. I mean, I grew up in this place. And it's a special place. It's a special place for Milwaukee, and it's a special place for my family and our company. So it's about what I know of the history of the hotel.
I'm looking for a typo.
I'm sorry. This is the last group that should ask for a password? What are you talking about? I saw someone had something. You know, it's funny. Our CIO just celebrated 25 years downstairs. You go ask her. But we, you know, I'm not even going to go near that question. I don't even want to feel you need to test us. All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you, Greg. All right, where was I? The wacky and wonderful history of socks. So I'm not going to follow up with that. I'm just going to go straight to, there's a lot of technology in socks, and compression socks and fabrics and stuff like that. And Amy and I went over to Illinois and went to the Sock Monkey Museum. So there's an actual museum that's about sock monkeys to prepare for this this dinner. And it was weird. Like, there's scissors there that you cut fabric and turn them into sock monkeys. So give me a moment, and if you'd like to get up out of your seats, it's okay. Feel free to get up. This is not a puzzle at all, right? Okay. There's some on the floor too if you missed it. So if you're in Rockford, Illinois had a sock company that is gray socks with the red heels. I think they're all gone. Sorry. So they took the red of the heel of both socks, and one goes on the face of the sock monkey, and one goes on the ass of the sock monkey. I didn't know about the ass part. It makes sense, right? So this whole talk was just to set up for a puzzle, but sock history is actually interesting, so I suggest just, go to ChatGPT and say, tell me about the history of socks.